You were never there for me, not even once. Those words from my daughter cut deeper than any knife. After 20 years of being painted as the absent father, I finally had a chance to tell my side of the story. But would a folder full of receipts be enough to undo 2 decades of lies? I've spent 20 years watching my daughter grow up from parking lots and through windows, collecting evidence of all the times I tried to be there. Birthday presents returned, letters sent back unopened, and the restraining order based on lies that kept me at a distance. Now in that therapist's office, I'm about to reveal the truth that her mother has hidden for so long, including the one devastating secret that could change everything. What would you do if your child believed you abandoned them, when the reality was something far more heartbreaking? Follow my journey as I fight to reclaim my place in my daughter's life, one receipt at a time, before it's too late. If you're watching this right now, make sure to follow our channel for more powerful real-life stories that will move you to tears. Like this video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us share more stories that need to be told. That stuffy therapist's office felt like a courtroom to me. The moment Dr. Winters closed the door behind us, my daughter Sophia fired words that had been waiting 20 years to be discharged. You were never there for me, not even once. I just looked at her. I've always been a man of calloused hands and few words, the kind who fixes things rather than explains them. But some things can't be fixed with tools. Her accusation hung in the air between us like smoke. I'd known this moment was coming. I'd rehearsed it every night for years in the silence of my empty apartment, but when she finally accused me of abandonment, the image that flashed in my mind wasn't the divorce papers or the courtroom battle. It was always the same. That empty chair in the 4th row of her 6th grade Christmas play, where I should have been sitting, but where her mother never allowed me to be. Dr. Winters looked at me with that practiced professional patience. Would you like to respond to that, Mr. Turner? Instead of answering him, I reached down for my weathered backpack, the same one I've carried to work sites for 15 years, and pulled out a worn brown leather folder. The edges were frayed, the leather cracked with age and memory. Do you know what this is, Sophia? I asked, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. She shook her head, suspicion hardening her features. At 32, she looked so much like her mother it physically hurt. Same dark eyes, same determined chin. But there was something else there too. Something of me. These are 20 years of receipts from events your mother never let me attend. Tickets I bought but couldn't use. Presents that were returned. Proof that I tried to be in every corner of your life, just not in the way you deserved. Her eyes narrowed, her shoulders tensed. More excuses? No, just truth. I opened the folder but didn't hand it to her yet. The timing wasn't right, because buried among those papers was something even she wasn't ready to see. You're telling me you have receipts for 20 years of, what? Being rejected? Her voice dripped with skepticism. Did you keep them as some kind of weird trophy collection? No, I said quietly. I kept them because someday I thought you might ask where I was, and I wanted to have an answer that wasn't just my word against hers. Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. Sophia, would you be willing to look at what your father has brought? This is ridiculous, she muttered, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of curiosity. Fine. Show me your so-called evidence. I pulled out the first item, a wrinkled program from her elementary school Christmas pageant. December 18, 2003. I'd circled her name in the cast list. Sophia Turner, reindeer number 3. I sat in my truck in the school parking lot that night, I said. Your mother had a restraining order against me based on lies she told the judge. But I couldn't miss seeing you, even from a distance. So I watched through the gymnasium windows. Sophia's face remained impassive, but her fingers trembled slightly as she took the program. Turn it over, I suggested. On the back was a security guard's scribbled note. Man removed from property per Mrs. Turner's request. Claims to be father. You could have forged this, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I nodded. I could have. But why would I forge 20 years of rejection? What would that get me? I pulled out another item, a receipt for a birthday present I'd tried to deliver when she turned 8, a silver necklace with her name. The receipt had "returned" stamped across it in red. Your mother threatened to call the police if I didn't leave, I explained, so I buried it under the oak tree in your front yard, hoping someday you'd find it. The oak tree? The one that got struck by lightning when I was 12? Something flickered across her face, the first crack in her certainty. I nodded. I planted that tree the weekend we moved into that house. 3 months before your mother asked me to leave. Dr. Winters made a note on his pad. Sophia, what are you feeling right now? She swallowed hard, confused. I don't know what to believe. My entire life I've been told you abandoned us, that you chose drinking and other women over your family. I felt my chest tighten. I never drank, not a drop, and there was never anyone else. Those were lies, Sophia. Then why didn't you fight harder? Her voice rose, raw emotion breaking through. Why didn't you take her to court for visitation rights? Why did you just disappear? This was the question I dreaded most, the one that kept me awake at night, because every time I tried, she told me how much you hated me, how you cried when my name was mentioned, how you were doing better without me confusing your life. I paused, forcing myself to meet her eyes, and eventually, I started to believe that staying away was the kindest thing I could do for you. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away furiously. That's not good enough. You're right. It's not. I reached into the folder again, but hesitated. There's something else in here that even you aren't ready to see yet. Her eyes widened slightly. What is it? I closed the folder. When you're ready to hear the whole truth, not just about me, but about your mother too, I'll show you. But not today. Dr. Winters checked his watch. Our time is almost up for today. Sophia, how would you feel about continuing these sessions? She stared at the folder in my hands, something shifting behind her eyes. Fine, but I'm not promising to believe anything. As we stood to leave, she paused at the door. Did you really come to every event? Even when you knew you couldn't get in? Not everyone, I admitted. Sometimes I couldn't get off work. Sometimes I didn't find out until it was too late. But I tried, Sophia. God knows I tried. She nodded once, a barely perceptible movement before walking out. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even understanding. But it was something I hadn't had in 20 years. A chance. And that folder held secrets that would either rebuild what we'd lost or destroy what little hope remained. Of all the evidence I'd kept, there was one I could never bring myself to throw away. An old VHS tape I'd converted to digital years ago, so worn from rewatching that parts of it were starting to blur. It was filmed from the school parking lot on the night of the Christmas pageant. My hands trembled so badly that the footage looked like it was shot during an earthquake. But there she was, my daughter, 6 years old, dressed as a little reindeer with pipe cleaner antlers that kept slipping to one side. I brought the tape with me to our second therapy session. Sophia arrived precisely 3 minutes late, just enough to make a point without seeming unprofessional. That precision reminded me so much of myself that I almost smiled. I've been thinking about what you showed me last week, she said without preamble as she sat down. She wore her dark hair pulled back tight, her business suit perfectly pressed. No jewelry except simple pearl earrings, her grandmother's, I recognized with a jolt. Dr. Winters nodded encouragingly. That's good. Processing takes time. I want to see more, she said, looking directly at me for the first time. Not with warmth, but with something less hostile than before. Scientific curiosity, perhaps. I pulled out the USB drive from my pocket. This might be harder to watch than the papers. Dr. Winters had a small TV in his office for such occasions. As the video began to play, I found myself holding my breath. The image was grainy, the night dark except for the golden glow of the elementary school windows. I'd zoomed in as much as the old camera would allow, focusing on the small stage where 20 first graders in various Christmas costumes fidgeted and forgot their lines. There, I whispered, pointing as little Sophia appeared stage right, her antlers now completely askew. That's you. On the video, my voice could be heard, barely audible over the distance and the wind. That's my girl. Look at her go. Sophia leaned forward, her eyes fixed on her childhood self. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around the edges. Then came the part I'd warned about. A security guard's shadow fell across the camera lens. His voice was clear, authoritative. Sir, you need to leave the premises immediately. Please, my recorded voice begged. I'm just watching my daughters play. I'm keeping my distance like the court said. Mrs. Turner specifically mentioned you might try this. She's shown us the restraining order. If you don't leave now, I'll have to call the police. In the video, the camera lowered briefly, then raised again for one last desperate shot of the stage before going dark. The last frame captured Sophia taking a little bow, looking out at the audience with a wide smile, searching perhaps for a face she wouldn't find. In Dr. Winters' office, Adult Sophia stared at the blank screen long after the video ended. When she finally spoke, her voice was hushed. I remember that play. Mom said you didn't come because you were too busy with your new girlfriend. I felt my throat tighten. There was never anyone else, Sophia. Not then, not ever. But the restraining order? She frowned. Why would there be a restraining order if you hadn't done something wrong? This was where it always got tricky. How do you explain to your child that the person they trust most in the world manipulated the system? That their mother lied under oath? Your mother told the court I was violent and threatening, I said carefully. She claimed I'd pushed her during an argument and made threatening phone calls. And did you? Sophia's eyes were laser-focused now, searching for any hint of deception. No, but she had a friend willing to testify that she'd witnessed it. I paused. Your Aunt Meg. Sophia's face changed. Aunt Meg? But she later told me herself that she regretted lying for Mom during the divorce. This was news to me. I felt a small flicker of vindication. When did she tell you that? At her wedding, 5 years ago. She was drunk and got emotional. Said she had things to make right. Sophia frowned. But then Mom pulled her away, and they never mentioned it again. Dr. Winters made a note. Sophia, does this video change anything for you? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, it's just hard to reconcile with everything I've been told my whole life. There's something else in that video, I said quietly. Something you didn't notice. Sophia looked back at the screen, confused. What? Watch the corner of the frame just before the security guard approaches, by the school entrance. Dr. Winters rewound the video and played it again. There, almost out of frame, stood a tall man in a dark coat. He was watching the security guard confront me, a satisfied smile on his face. Who is that? Sophia asked. That's Richard Dalton, I said. Your mother was seeing him for months before she asked for the divorce. He was a lawyer at her firm. Sophia's face drained of color. That's impossible. Mom always said she didn't date anyone until I was in middle school. He helped her with the restraining order paperwork, free of charge. I let the implication hang in the air. Sophia stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. I need some air. Dr. Winters started to say something about our session not being over, but I shook my head slightly. She needed space. As Sophia reached the door, she paused without turning around. Next week? Bring more. When she was gone, Dr. Winters looked at me with something like respect. You've been patient for a very long time, haven't you? I just nodded, tucking the USB drive back into my pocket. In the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Sophia standing alone by the water fountain. For the briefest moment, she looked back at me without the wall of hostility, just a flash of vulnerability, of uncertainty. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even understanding. But it was a crack in the foundation of lies she'd been raised on. And in that crack, perhaps the truth could finally take root. On the morning of Sophia's 8th birthday, I woke before dawn. The October air had that particular Midwest chill that seeps into your bones, warning of the winter to come. I remember staring at my ceiling for a long time, mentally rehearsing what I'd say if, by some miracle, Diane actually let me see our daughter that day. The silver necklace with Sophia engraved on it had been sitting in my dresser drawer for weeks. Nothing extravagant, just a simple sterling silver pendant on a delicate chain. I'd spent 3 extra shifts at the construction site to afford it, picking up weekend work that left my body aching but my heart hopeful. I wrapped it in blue paper, Sophia's favorite color that year, and tied it with a white ribbon, my calloused fingers fumbling with the small bow. I drove to their house, the house that had once been ours, parking a block away as I always did to avoid immediate confrontation. The restraining order had been lifted 6 months earlier when Diane's false allegations couldn't be substantiated, but she'd made it abundantly clear I wasn't welcome. Still, it was my daughter's birthday. I had to try. The oak tree I'd planted in the front yard had grown impressively in the 3 years since I'd been forced to leave. I remember planting it the weekend we moved in, Sophia helping by dropping handfuls of dirt on my work boots. She'd been 5 then, all gangly limbs and endless questions about whether the tree would grow tall enough for a treehouse someday. I approached the front door, present in hand, heart hammering against my ribs. 3 knocks, footsteps, then Diane's face, hardening the moment she saw me. What are you doing here? Her voice was ice, eyes narrowed with practiced contempt. It's Sophia's birthday, I said simply, holding out the small package. I just wanted to drop this off for her. She doesn't want anything from you. The words were delivered with such conviction that for a moment I almost believed them. "Please, Diane. It's just a necklace with her name. Nothing expensive or flashy. Just something from her dad." Her eyes flicked to the blue package, then back to my face. "I'll give you exactly 30 seconds to get off my property before I call the police." The restraining order was dropped. I reminded her gently. "I have a legal right." 25 seconds. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of small fingers gripping the banister of the staircase. A flash of dark hair. Sophia, listening, watching. "Sophia," I called out, hope surging in my chest. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I brought you." The door slammed with such force that the small brass knocker rattled. Through the wood, I heard Diane's muffled voice. "Go to your room, now." I stood there, package still in hand, feeling the weight of it grow heavier with each passing second. I could hear Diane on the phone inside, likely calling the police despite the dropped restraining order. I had maybe 5 minutes before they arrived to escort me away. Again. That's when I made a decision that would haunt and sustain me for years to come. I walked to the oak tree, our tree, and knelt beside it. The ground was still soft from recent rain, and my construction-strengthened hands made quick work of digging a small hole near the roots, deep enough to protect the package, but shallow enough that someday, perhaps, it might be found. I placed the blue package inside and covered it carefully, patting the dirt down and brushing fallen leaves over the spot to conceal my work. Standing, I pressed my palm against the rough bark of the tree, whispering words meant for a daughter who couldn't hear them. "Happy birthday, Sophia. I'm sorry I can't give this to you today, but it's here waiting, just like me." Police sirens wailed in the distance as I walked back to my truck. 24 years later in Dr. Winter's office, I recounted this story almost as an afterthought. We'd been discussing the video from the Christmas pageant, and Sophia had remained skeptical, defensive. But something about the mention of the buried present caught her attention. "You buried a present under the oak tree?" she asked, interrupting my narrative. I nodded. "For your 8th birthday. A silver necklace with your name on it." Dr. Winters, sensing a potential breakthrough, leaned forward. "Sophia, what are you thinking right now?" She hesitated, biting her lower lip, a childhood habit I was surprised to see had survived into adulthood. "When I was 12, that tree was struck by lightning during a summer storm. It split right down the middle." "I heard," I said quietly. "Your mother's neighbor told me when I ran into him at the hardware store. We had to have it removed," Sophia continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. "And when the landscapers were digging out the stump, they found something." Her eyes met mine, questioning. "A small box, damaged by water and roots. Mom took it immediately and told me it was probably just trash someone had buried." Dr. Winters nodded encouragingly. "And you never saw what was inside?" Sophia shook her head slowly. "No, but that night I heard her crying in her bedroom. I thought it was because she was sad about losing the tree." The revelation hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. "If what you're saying is true," Sophia said carefully, "there's a way to verify it." "How?" I asked. "Describe the necklace." "In detail." I closed my eyes, picturing it. Sterling silver chain, thin but not too delicate. The pendant was your name in cursive writing, with a tiny heart dotting the I instead of a regular dot. On the back, I had them engraved, "With love, Dad." When I opened my eyes, Sophia's face had lost some of its carefully maintained composure. "If I asked you to come back next week with proof of that purchase, could you do it?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. I kept the receipt with all the others. Dr. Winters cleared his throat gently. "Sophia, I'm curious why this particular story seems to have affected you differently than the others." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Because I found a silver chain in Mom's jewelry box last year when I was helping her pack for her move to Florida. It was broken, tarnished. When I asked her about it, she claimed not to remember where it came from. My heart thundered in my chest. Did you see if there was a pendant?" "No pendant," Sophia said. "Just the chain." She paused, then added almost reluctantly, "But it looked like something might have been removed from it." The session ended with Sophia asking if she could take the folder of receipts home to examine them more closely. I handed it over without hesitation, though I kept back the final envelope, the one containing the most difficult truth. She wasn't ready for that yet. As she left, she turned back briefly. "If I dig through the garden at Mom's old house, will I find other buried presents?" "No," I answered honestly. "Just that one." After that, I started sending them to your grandmother instead, hoping she might pass them along. Grandma never gave me anything from you. I know. She returned them all, unopened. I managed a small, sad smile, but I kept trying anyway. For the first time since our sessions began, Sophia left without a sharp comment or suspicious glance. Instead, she simply nodded, clutching the folder to her chest like a shield that was slowly, imperceptibly, beginning to lower. The air conditioning in Dr. Winter's office seemed particularly aggressive that day, chilling the room to an uncomfortable degree that matched the tension between Sophia and me. Our fourth session began with Dr. Winters suggesting we try a different approach. "I'd like each of you to write a letter to the other," he said, sliding 2 yellow legal pads across his desk. "Something honest, without the pressure of immediate response." I couldn't help but laugh, a short, dry sound that escaped before I could catch it. Sophia looked at me sharply. "Is something funny about that?" she asked, that familiar defensive edge returning to her voice. I shook my head. "No, it's just, I've written you 73 letters over the years. None of them were ever answered." Dr. Winters raised his eyebrows. 73? 74 if you count the one I wrote last Christmas but never mailed. I pulled a worn leather satchel onto my lap, different from the folder I'd brought to our previous sessions. I kept copies of most of them, the ones that weren't returned to me with "recipient refused" stamped across them in red ink. Sophia's posture stiffened, but I noticed she didn't immediately dismiss my claim as she might have a few weeks ago. Progress, however small. "May I see one?" Dr. Winters asked. I nodded, flipping through the carefully preserved pages until I found what I was looking for. The paper was yellowed at the edges, the ink slightly faded. I handed it to Dr. Winters, who glanced at it before looking to Sophia. "Would you be comfortable if I read this aloud?" She hesitated, then gave a curt nod, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles whitened. Dr. Winters cleared his throat and began to read. April 17, 2009. "Dear Sophia, I heard from Mrs. Geller next door that you're in the hospital for an appendectomy. I'm sitting in the hospital parking lot as I write this, hoping they might let me see you, even just for a minute." The nurse at the front desk was kind but firm. "Only immediate family allowed, and apparently I don't qualify anymore. I want you to know that if you need blood, mine is type O negative, the universal donor. They can call me day or night and I'll be there. I've included my phone number at the bottom of this letter, though I doubt it will reach you. I remember when you were 7 and fell off your bike, how terrified you were of the 3 stitches they put in your knee. You squeezed my hand so hard I lost feeling in my fingers, but I would have let you break every bone in my hand if it helped take your fear away. I hope someone is holding your hand now. I'm sorry I can't be there. I've tried calling your mother to ask permission, but she's changed her number again. I've tried the hospital administration, but without a court order overriding her wishes, they can't let me in. So I'll wait here in the parking lot until they tell me you're out of surgery safely. The security guard knows me by now. I'm the dad who sits in his truck with a thermos of coffee and watches the hospital windows, wondering which one is yours. Get well soon, Sophia. I love you always, Dad." The office fell silent as Dr. Winters finished reading. I kept my eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, afraid to look at Sophia's reaction. When I finally risked a glance, I saw her hands trembling slightly in her lap. "I never received that letter," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," I replied. "I gave it to a nurse who promised to try, but the next day when I called to check, she told me your mother had instructed the staff not to accept any communications from me." Sophia's brow furrowed. "I remember that surgery. Mom told me you called once to ask if I was okay but didn't bother to visit." I swallowed hard, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I slept in my truck in that parking lot for 2 nights. The security guard, Jim, brought me a blanket on the second night. Said he had a daughter too and he couldn't imagine being kept away from her if she was sick." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. "Why didn't you fight harder? Why didn't you take Mom to court for visitation rights?" It was the same question she'd asked in our first session, but this time it lacked the accusatory edge. This time she seemed genuinely puzzled. "I tried twice. The first time your mother had her lawyer, the same man you saw in that Christmas video, claim that my presence was causing you emotional distress. They brought in a child psychologist who testified that you cried at the mention of my name." "That's not true," Sophia said quickly. "I don't remember any psychologist. The second time, 3 years later, they said any disruption to your routine would be detrimental to your academic progress. By then you were 13. The judge said you were old enough to decide for yourself and your mother presented a letter. I trailed off, the memory still painful after all these years. What letter? Sophia prompted. A letter supposedly written by you, saying you didn't want to see me. I met her eyes directly. It said I had never been there for you when it mattered, and you were better off without me confusing your life. Sophia's face drained of color. I never wrote any letter. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Finally, she stood abruptly, pulling her phone from her purse. Excuse me, I need to make a call. Dr. Winters gestured toward the door. Take your time. We still have 20 minutes left in our session. Sophia stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. Through the frosted glass, I could see her silhouette, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing emphatically. The conversation seemed heated, even from a distance. When she returned 5 minutes later, her face was composed again, but her eyes were hard. That was my mother, she said flatly, sitting back down. She says you're manipulating events to make yourself look better, that these letters are probably recent fabrications. My heart sank. We had been making progress, I thought, but Diane still had a powerful hold on our daughter's perception of reality. The dates on the postmarks would prove otherwise, I said quietly. Sophia's eyes flashed. She also said if you were really concerned during my surgery, you would have called more than once, that a real father would have moved heaven and earth to be by his daughter's side. I felt a familiar weight settle in my chest, the helpless frustration of being villainized no matter what I did. I called 17 times over those 3 days. I have the phone records in that folder I gave you. Something flickered across her face. Doubt, perhaps. I'll look for them, she said. As our session drew to a close, Sophia paused at the door. If everything you're saying is true, why would she lie all these years? What would be the point? It was the question I'd asked myself countless nights, staring at my ceiling in the dark. I don't know for certain, I answered honestly. But sometimes when people tell a lie long enough, they start to believe it themselves. She nodded slowly, her hand resting on the doorknob. Next week, bring the rest of the letters. After she left, Dr. Winters looked at me with compassion. How are you holding up through all this, Robert? I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of 20 years pressing down on my shoulders. I've waited so long for her to even consider hearing my side that I'm afraid to hope. Every time I think we're making progress, Diane pulls her back. Trust the process, he advised. The truth has a way of making itself known, given enough time and space. I nodded, gathering my satchel of letters, physical proof of a father's love that never reached its intended recipient. As I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of Sophia at the end of the corridor, her back against the wall, eyes closed, still clutching her phone. For a moment, she looked exactly like the little girl I remembered, vulnerable, uncertain, trying so hard to make sense of an adult world that often made no sense at all. I received the news of Margaret Turner's death on a Tuesday morning in March. The mail carrier had pushed the crisp white envelope through my slot along with the usual bills and advertisements. It stood out immediately, heavy cream-colored stationery with my name and address written in elegant cursive. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It belonged to my former mother-in-law, a woman who had shown me more kindness than anyone else in Diane's family. My hands trembled as I opened it, wondering what Margaret could possibly want to tell me after nearly 2 decades of silence. Inside was a brief note written on matching stationery, dated 3 weeks earlier. Robert, by the time you receive this, I will be gone. Pancreatic cancer works quickly, they tell me. I've enclosed a copy of something I believe you should have. Use it wisely. I'm sorry I couldn't do more while I was alive. Margaret. Beneath her note was a folded legal document, a copy of her last will and testament. My heart pounded as I scanned the formal language, stopping abruptly at a section highlighted in pale yellow. To my granddaughter, Sophia Elizabeth Turner, I leave not only my pearl earrings, which she has always admired, but also the enclosed letter, to be delivered unopened upon my death. It contains truths I was too cowardly to speak in life. I sat heavily on my worn armchair, the implications washing over me like ice water. Margaret, the only person who had occasionally, secretly, updated me on Sophia's life, had left behind what might be the key to unlocking 20 years of lies. But the will didn't include the letter itself, only the mention of it. The next day I called the law firm listed on the will, explaining that I was Sophia's father. The receptionist transferred me to a sympathetic paralegal who confirmed that yes, There was a sealed letter for Sophia that had been delivered along with the pearl earrings. No, they couldn't tell me its contents. Yes, Sophia had already collected her inheritance 2 weeks prior. I brought the copy of the will to our next therapy session, uncertain whether I should mention it, but when Sophia arrived, something about her demeanor had changed. The defensive edge that usually surrounded her like armor had softened slightly. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, as if she hadn't been sleeping well. "I found the phone records," she said, without preamble, setting her purse beside her chair. 17 calls to the hospital over 3 days, just like you said. I nodded, unsure how to respond. This small validation shouldn't have meant so much, but it did. "I also found something else," she continued, pulling a familiar blue envelope from her bag. "This was mixed in with the receipts. It's a sympathy card, signed by the security guard from the hospital, Jim. He wrote about how dedicated you were, sleeping in your truck, bringing coffee to the night nurses who promised to check on me. Jim was kind to me," I said quietly. "When they finally made me leave the premises, he slipped me his personal cell number, told me he'd text me updates when he could." Sophia's expression tightened. "Mom always said no one at the hospital ever mentioned you asking about me." Dr. Winters, who had been silently observing our exchange, leaned forward. "Sophia, how are you feeling about these discoveries?" She looked down at her hands, twisting a tissue between her fingers. "Confused. Angry. I don't know what to believe anymore." She paused. "I asked Mom directly about the hospital stays. She said you're manipulating evidence, changing dates on old phone records. The accusation stung, even though it was predictable. The phone company records would confirm the dates," I said gently. "They're not something I could alter." Sophia nodded slowly. "I know, I called them myself." She looked up, meeting my eyes. "They verified the records." My breath caught. This was the first time she had actively sought to verify my claims rather than automatically dismissing them. "There's something else," I said carefully, reaching for the envelope containing Margaret's will. "I received this last week. It's about your grandmother." Sophia's expression changed. "Grandma? What about her? I'm sorry to be the one to tell you she passed away." "I know that," Sophia said, looking confused. "It was almost a month ago. Cancer." I nodded. "She sent me this just before she died." I handed her the copy of the will, the highlighted section clearly visible. "She left you something besides the pearl earrings." Sophia stared at the document, her fingers tracing the highlighted text. "A letter," she murmured. "Did you receive it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She nodded slowly. "Yes. The lawyer gave me a sealed envelope along with the earrings. I haven't opened it yet." "Why not?" Dr. Winters asked gently. Sophia's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "Because Mom was there when I received it. She said Grandma had become confused toward the end, that whatever was in the letter couldn't be trusted." She wiped at her eyes angrily. "She took it from me, said she'd keep it safe until I was ready to read it." "And you let her take it?" Dr. Winters asked, his tone carefully non-judgmental. "She's my mother," Sophia said, as if that explained everything. And perhaps it did. A lifetime of conditioning to trust one parent implicitly while doubting the other was not easily overcome. I took a deep breath. "Sophia, I believe that letter contains information your grandmother wanted you to know. Information about me, about your mother, about why things happened the way they did. You don't know that," she countered, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, I don't," I admitted. "But I knew your grandmother. She was a fair woman who valued truth even when it was difficult." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her internal struggle visible on her face. Finally, she asked, "If what you're saying is true, if Mom has been lying all these years, why would Grandma wait until after her death to tell me? Why not say something while she was alive?" It was a fair question, and one I'd asked myself many times since receiving Margaret's letter. "I think she was caught in an impossible position," I said slowly. "She didn't want to lose her relationship with you or with her daughter. Speaking up would have meant potentially being cut off from both of you." "That's convenient," Sophia said, but the words lacked her usual sharpness. Dr. Winters interjected gently. "Sophia, would you be willing to try to retrieve that letter before our next session? I think it could be an important piece in understanding your family history." She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try." As our session drew to a close, I felt compelled to ask the question that had been haunting me. "Why did you agree to these therapy sessions in the first place?" After 20 years of believing I abandoned you, what changed? Sophia gathered her things, avoiding my gaze. Mom's getting remarried. To Richard, the man from the Christmas video. When she told me, she said something that didn't make sense. She said, "Now you'll finally have a real father, one who's been there all along." The implications of that statement hung in the air between us. "All along?" I repeated quietly. Sophia nodded. It made me wonder what else might not be as I've always believed. She paused at the door. "I'm going to get that letter." After she left, Dr. Winters turned to me. "Are you prepared for what might be in that letter? It could change everything, for better or worse." I nodded, feeling a mix of hope and trepidation. I've waited 20 years for the truth. I can handle whatever it contains. But as I walked to my truck, I wondered if that was really true. Some truths, once revealed, can never be undone. And while I desperately wanted Sophia to know I had never abandoned her, I took no pleasure in the pain that would come with realizing her mother had systematically deceived her for 2 decades. The truth, as they say, will set you free. But first, it might break your heart. May 17, 2014 was a perfect spring day in central Illinois, the kind of day that makes you believe in new beginnings. The sky was an unblemished blue, the air warm but not yet heavy with summer humidity. I remember every detail because it was Sophia's high school graduation day, and I had circled the date on my calendar months in advance. I knew I wouldn't be welcome inside the gymnasium where the ceremony would take place. The restraining order had long since expired, but Diane had made it clear through her lawyer that my presence would cause a disruption to Sophia's special day. So I did what I had done for years. I found a way to be there without being seen. The high school gymnasium had large windows along its eastern wall. I parked my truck at the far end of the lot, positioned with a clear view. I wore a dress shirt and tie, the same navy blue tie I'd worn to Sophia's kindergarten graduation, now frayed at the edges but still presentable. I wanted to look my best, even if the only person who would see me was my own reflection in the rearview mirror. I arrived 2 hours early to secure my spot, clutching a small digital camera I'd purchased specially for the occasion. My hands trembled with a mixture of anticipation and the familiar ache of being an outsider at my own daughter's milestone. Through the Zoom lens, I watched parents and families streaming into the building, carrying flowers and balloons, their faces bright with pride. I recognized some of them, parents who had once been our friends, back when we were a normal family. At precisely 1 p.m., the ceremony began. I couldn't hear the speeches or the music, but I could see the rows of graduates in their blue caps and gowns. I scanned the sea of faces, holding my breath until I spotted her. My Sophia, seated in the 3rd row, her posture perfect, just as it had always been, even as a small child. Even from a distance, I could see she'd grown into a beautiful young woman. She looked so much like her mother, but there was something in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself, that reminded me of my own mother. When they called her name, I couldn't hear it, but I saw her rise and walk across the stage. I fumbled with the camera, desperate to capture the moment. My fingers shook so badly that most of the photos came out blurry, but I managed one clear shot as she accepted her diploma. In that frozen moment, her smile was radiant, and I allowed myself to imagine it was directed at me. It was only later, when I reviewed the photos at home, that I noticed something in the background. Behind Sophia, partially obscured by other faculty members but still recognizable, stood Diane, and beside her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back, was Richard Dalton, the same man from the Christmas pageant video all those years ago, the lawyer who had helped her craft the restraining order that had kept me from my daughter's life. I printed that photo and kept it in my wallet, next to my driver's license. Not because I wanted to remember Diane's betrayal, but because it was the clearest image I had of my daughter as a young adult. Sometimes, on particularly difficult days, I would take it out and look at her face, trying to imagine the person she was becoming without me. Now, 10 years later, I slid that worn, creased photo across Dr. Winters's desk. Sophia picked it up carefully as if it might disintegrate in her hands. "This is from my high school graduation," she said. Not a question, but a statement. I nodded. I watched from the parking lot, through the gymnasium windows. Her brow furrowed as she studied the image. "You were there? Mom said you didn't even call to congratulate me." "I sent a card with a check for $500, I said quietly. "To your grandmother's address, since your mother had blocked my emails and returned my previous letters." The check was never cashed. Sophia's eyes remained fixed on the photo, her expression unreadable. Then she pointed to the background. Who is this woman standing behind me? I leaned forward, confused by her question. That's your mother. No, not her. This woman, to the right. I squinted at the photo. There was indeed another woman partially visible at the edge of the frame, middle-aged with short dark hair, wearing a blue dress. I don't know. One of the teachers, maybe? Sophia shook her head slowly. That's Barbara Collins, Mom's old college roommate. She looked up at me, her eyes narrowing. What's strange is that I've never met her. Mom always said they lost touch years before I was born. Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. Why is that significant, Sophia? She hesitated, glancing between the photo and me. Because last week, when I went to Mom's house to look for Grandma's letter, I found a box of old photographs in her closet, pictures I'd never seen before. She paused. There were dozens of photos of Mom with this same woman, Barbara, from throughout my childhood. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, vacations, events Mom always told me were just family time. I felt a chill run through me. Your mother told you these events were just the two of you? Sophia nodded, her face pale. But in these photos, Barbara was there, at everything. And Richard too, more often than not. She swallowed hard. In one album from when I was about 10, there was a photo of all three of them at a beach house. The caption said, "Family vacation, Ocean City." Dr. Winters made a note on his pad. Did you find your grandmother's letter? No, Sophia said, her voice tight with frustration. Mom claims she can't remember where she put it. She looked down at the graduation photo again. But finding those albums made me start to question everything. If Mom lied about who was present in my life all those years, what else might she have lied about? I wanted to reach out to offer some comfort, but I knew better than to push too fast. Sophia was navigating her way through a lifetime of deception, and she needed to do it at her own pace. There's something else about this photo, I said carefully. Something I didn't notice until years later. Sophia looked up. What? Look at the way Richard is standing with your mother. His hand on her back, the familiar way they're leaning toward each other. That's not the body language of people who just started dating. She studied the image again, her trained eye catching what I was referencing. They look, comfortable together, established. Richard was at your Christmas pageant when you were 6, I reminded her gently. The same Richard who helped your mother file for the restraining order against me. Sophia set the photo down carefully on the desk. Mom always told me they didn't start dating until I was in middle school, that they met through a mutual friend after the divorce was long settled. I believe your mother and Richard were involved before our marriage ended, I said, the words difficult even after all these years. I have no proof beyond what you can see in these photographs, but the timeline never made sense any other way. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the outline of her younger self in the photo. I need to find that letter, she said finally, determination hardening her voice. Whatever Grandma wanted me to know, Mom is deliberately keeping it from me. Dr. Winters nodded. That seems like an important next step. As our session drew to a close, Sophia picked up the graduation photo again. Can I keep this? Of course, I said, my heart lightening slightly at the request. It was the first time she had asked to keep anything of mine. She slipped the photo carefully into her purse. I'm going back to Mom's house tomorrow. I'm going to turn the place upside down if I have to. Would you like me to come with you? I offered, then immediately regretted it, afraid I'd pushed too far too fast. To my surprise, Sophia didn't immediately reject the idea. No, she said after a moment's consideration. This is something I need to do myself, but, she hesitated. Would you be available afterward, in case I find it? The question, the first time in 20 years she had voluntarily suggested seeing me outside of these therapy sessions, nearly took my breath away. Yes, I managed. Anytime, day or night. As she left, she paused at the door. I owe you an apology, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I've blamed you my whole life for not fighting harder to be in it. I'm starting to understand that maybe you were fighting in the only ways you could. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving me with a fragile hope I scarcely dared to trust. Dr. Winters watched me carefully. Are you okay, Robert? I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. This is significant progress, he said gently. But prepare yourself. If Sophia finds that letter, things might move very quickly and not always in a straight line. I've waited 20 years, I said, finding my voice at last. I can handle whatever comes next. But as I walked to my truck, I wondered if that was true. The truth, once fully revealed, would hurt Sophia deeply, and despite everything, I had never wanted to see my daughter in pain. I arrived at our next-to-last therapy session with a manila envelope that had been sitting in my safe deposit box for nearly 20 years. The edges were crisp, unmarked by time. Unlike the other evidence I'd shared with Sophia, this hadn't been handled repeatedly, hadn't been a talisman I returned to for comfort or validation. This was the cold, hard documentation of sacrifice, a paper trail I'd never wanted to use as leverage. Dr. Winter's office seemed smaller somehow, the walls closer, as if the weight of what was about to happen was physically compressing the space around us. I'd arrived early, my nerves too frayed to sit at home waiting. When Sophia finally walked in, the change in her was immediately apparent. She looked exhausted, dark circles shadowing her eyes. Her usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, minimal makeup, clothes that looked like they'd been chosen without much thought. But it was the set of her jaw, the look of grim determination in her eyes, that truly caught my attention. She sat down heavily across from me, placed her purse on the floor, and pulled out a cream-colored envelope. My heart stuttered. "I found it," she said simply, her voice hollow. Dr. Winters leaned forward. "Your grandmother's letter?" Sophia nodded. It was in Mom's filing cabinet, hidden inside a folder of insurance documents. She ran her thumb along the sealed edge of the envelope. She deliberately hid it where she thought I wouldn't look. "Have you read it?" I asked quietly. "Not yet." She met my eyes. I thought we should read it together." The gesture, this willingness to include me in such a pivotal moment, left me momentarily speechless. I could only nod. "Dr. Winters cleared his throat gently. "Would you like to read it now, Sophia? Or would you prefer to take some time?" "Now," she said firmly. "I can't take any more secrets." With trembling fingers, she broke the seal on the envelope and carefully extracted a handwritten letter, the pages covered in Margaret's elegant script. Sophia took a deep breath and began to read aloud. "My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, I've passed on, and there are truths I can no longer avoid telling you. I've been a coward in life, and for that I am deeply sorry. Your mother, my daughter, has systematically lied to you about your father for your entire life. Robert never abandoned you. He never chose other women over his family. He never failed to pay child support. He never declined to attend your events or milestones. The truth is that Diane deliberately kept him away, using legal maneuvers, false accusations, and manipulation to systematically erase him from your life. The restraining order she obtained was based on testimony from Barbara and myself, testimony that was wholly fabricated at Diane's insistence. May God forgive me for this sin. Your father tried repeatedly to maintain contact with you. He sent letters, gifts, and requests for visitation, all of which Diane intercepted. He appeared at every school event he could discover through public announcements, always watching from a distance to avoid violating the court orders Diane had engineered. Your father never stopped loving you or trying to be part of your life. The man you've been taught to hate has been the victim of a sustained campaign to remove him from your life so that Diane, Richard, and Barbara could create their own family unit without complication. I was complicit in this deception out of fear of losing my relationship with you and Diane. It is the greatest regret of my life. Attached to this letter is the address where your father has lived for the past 15 years. Also enclosed is a key to a storage unit containing every gift, letter, and card he ever sent you that was returned or intercepted. I leave it to you to decide what to do with this information. I can only pray that you might find it in your heart to learn the truth for yourself. With deepest regret and eternal love, your grandmother." As Sophia finished reading, her voice had dropped to barely more than a whisper. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the soft sound of her tears hitting the paper. I didn't move, didn't speak. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't feel self-serving or intrusive in this moment of revelation. Finally, Sophia looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. There was a key in the envelope, and an address. Your address. She was right about that. I nodded. I've lived in the same apartment since the divorce. I never moved because I was afraid you wouldn't be able to find me if you ever looked. Sophia wiped her eyes. All those years, she lied about everything. Her voice hardened. She forged a letter from me saying I didn't want to see you? Who does that to their own child? Dr. Winters spoke gently. People who are deeply wounded sometimes make choices that wound others, often without fully recognizing the harm they're causing. Sophia shook her head sharply. Don't make excuses for her. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was 20 years of deliberate deception. She turned to me, her expression shifting. What's in that envelope you brought? I looked down at the manila envelope in my lap. After Margaret's letter, it seemed almost trivial, but it was another piece of the puzzle she deserved to have. Child support records, I said, passing it to her. Every payment I made over 20 years, always on time, often with additional money when I could manage it. Sophia opened the envelope and began to sort through the documents. Bank statements, canceled checks, court receipts. 2 decades of financial obligation meticulously fulfilled despite the fact that I was never allowed to see the child I was supporting. Mom told me you barely paid anything, she said quietly. That she had to work 2 jobs because you wouldn't help. I paid $250 a month from the beginning, I explained. It increased to $2,500 when I got a better job at the construction company. The court-ordered amount was $850, but I always sent more when I could. Sophia stared at the documents, her fingers tracing the steady progression of payments. All this time, I thought. She couldn't finish the sentence. I know what you thought, I said gently. It's what she wanted you to think. Sophia gathered the papers back into the envelope, her movements deliberate and controlled despite the emotion evident on her face. Why? She asked, the single word laden with 20 years of confusion. Why did you keep all this? Why didn't you just give up? The question pierced me. It was the heart of everything, the reason I'd endured years of rejection and pain. Because you're my daughter, I said simply. And I thought someday, even if you didn't believe my words, the paper trail might speak for me. I managed a small, sad smile. I'm a practical man, Sophia. Always have been. I build things that last. I keep receipts. I document my work. It's who I am. She nodded slowly, a glimmer of recognition in her eyes. I'm the same way. Mom always said I was too meticulous, too concerned with documentation. A bitter laugh escaped her. Now I understand why that bothered her so much. As our session drew to a close, Sophia gathered her things with unusual care, as if physically organizing her belongings might help her organize the emotional chaos she was experiencing. What will you do now? Dr. Winters asked gently. I need time to process, she said, her voice steadier than I expected. And then I need to speak with my mother. She left without another word, her back straight, her steps purposeful. I watched her go, torn between hope and fear for what would come next. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment staring at the same 4 walls that had witnessed 20 years of solitary grieving, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Dad, I want to know your story. All of it. From the beginning. No filters. No versions. Sophia. My hands shook so badly I could barely type the reply. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here. For the first time in 20 years, I slept without the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on my chest. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late October when the envelope arrived. No return address, just my name written in a handwriting I'd grown familiar with over our months of therapy. Inside was a simple card with an invitation printed in elegant script. Maplewood Elementary School proudly presents our annual fall musical, The Wizard of Oz, featuring Lily Turner as Dorothy, November 12th, 7 p.m. Beneath the printed text was a handwritten note. 4th row, seat 7. It's been saved for you. Sophia. My hands trembled as I read and reread those words. 4th row. The same row where I should have sat 20 years ago at her Christmas pageant. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I checked the date a dozen times, marked it on every calendar I owned, set multiple reminders on my phone. In the weeks following our final therapy session, Sophia and I had met several times, first at a neutral coffee shop, then for dinner at a quiet restaurant, and finally at my apartment, where I showed her the small shelf of photo albums I'd kept. Pictures of her as a baby that Diane hadn't managed to destroy in the divorce, photographs I'd taken from a distance at public events, newspaper clippings of her academic achievements I'd carefully preserved. She told me about her confrontation with Diane, a volcanic eruption of 20 years of lies exposed in a single afternoon. Diane had deflected, denied, then finally broken down and admitted portions of the truth while still attempting to justify her actions. Sophia had left her mother's house that day and hadn't spoken to her since. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her, she'd said during one of our conversations. But I'm trying to rebuild what was taken from us. And now this invitation to see my granddaughter perform. A granddaughter I hadn't known existed until Sophia mentioned her during our 4th therapy session. Lily, 7 years old, dark hair like her mother and grandmother, but with my family's blue eyes, a genetic echo across 3 generations. I arrived at Maplewood Elementary a full hour early, dressed in my best clothes. A charcoal gray suit I'd purchased specially for the occasion, a crisp white shirt, and the same navy blue tie I'd worn to Sophia's kindergarten graduation. Though frayed at the edges, it felt right to wear it, a thread connecting past to present. The school parking lot was already filling with parents and grandparents clutching bouquets and cameras. I joined them, no longer relegated to watching from a distance, no longer an outsider pressing my face against the glass of my daughter's life. Inside, the gymnasium had been transformed with a painted backdrop of the yellow brick road and Emerald City. Rows of folding chairs faced a small stage, and children in costume darted about as harried teachers attempted to corral them backstage. I found my seat easily, 4th row, seat 7, and noticed a small paper program placed on it. Opening it, I saw Lily's name circled in red marker, just as I had once circled Sophia's name all those years ago. The seats around me gradually filled with chattering families, but the one beside me remained empty. I tried not to feel disappointed. Sophia was a busy professional with responsibilities. Perhaps she'd be late or couldn't make it at all. The important thing was that she had invited me, had wanted me here. Just as the lights began to dim, I felt a presence beside me and turned to see Sophia sliding into the seat, slightly breathless. "Sorry," she whispered. Emergency meeting ran long. She was dressed in her work clothes, a tailored navy suit, hair pulled back in a neat bun, but she had a small silver-wrapped package on her lap. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me a small, tentative smile that filled my chest with warmth. The elementary school production was exactly what you'd expect. Forgotten lines, wobbly scenery, and occasional stage fright mixed with moments of surprising poise from certain children. Lily, to my entirely biased opinion, was the standout performer, delivering her lines with clear confidence and only occasionally glancing toward our row for reassurance. During Somewhere Over the Rainbow, I felt Sophia's hand slip into mine. A simple gesture, but one that nearly undid me completely. I held on as if it were a lifeline, this first voluntary physical contact between us in 20 years. When the final curtain call came, Lily took her bow center stage, beaming with the pure joy only a 7-year-old can muster. I found myself on my feet applauding wildly, tears streaming down my face without shame. From the stage, Lily spotted us and waved enthusiastically, mouthing what looked like "Grandpa," before being ushered off stage with the other children. "Grandpa?" I whispered to Sophia, overwhelmed. She nodded. "I've been showing her pictures, telling her about you." She hesitated. "I hope that's okay." "Okay?" I choked out. There aren't words, Sophia." After the performance, we waited in the crowded hallway outside the gymnasium. Lily came bounding out, still in her Dorothy costume, complete with ruby slippers and Toto basket. She skidded to a stop in front of us, suddenly shy as she looked up at me. "Are you really my grandpa?" she asked, direct and curious in that unfiltered way of children. I knelt down to her eye level, my knees protesting the movement. "Yes, I am. And you were the best Dorothy I've ever seen." She studied me carefully. "Mommy said you couldn't come to her plays when she was little because you were kept away by a bad spell like in Oz." I glanced up at Sophia, surprised by this child-friendly version of our painful history. "Something like that," I agreed gently. "But the spell is broken now." Lily nodded, accepting this with the easy belief of childhood. "Are you coming to Thanksgiving at our house? Mommy said you might." I looked up at Sophia, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I would love to," I told Lily. "Good," she declared. "I have to go change now. Don't leave without saying goodbye." And with that, she darted back toward the classroom serving as a dressing room. Sophia and I stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching her go. "Thanksgiving?" I finally asked. "If you want to," she said. "It's just going to be the 3 of us. I'm still not speaking to Mom, and..." She trailed off, then added softly, "It seems like time to start some new family traditions." Later, as we walked to the parking lot with Lily skipping ahead of us, Sophia turned to me. "Why did you keep trying all those years?" Most people would have given up. I thought about it, watching my granddaughter's ruby slippers flash in the autumn moonlight, because being your father wasn't something I could stop being, even when I wasn't allowed to do it properly. Sophia nodded, blinking back tears. I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth. Don't be, I said. You were a child caught in an impossible situation. The blame doesn't rest with you. Still, she insisted. 20 years. We have now, I said simply. And tomorrow. And Thanksgiving. As we reached our cars, Lily ran back to throw her arms around my waist in a fierce hug that nearly buckled my knees with emotion. Bye, Grandpa. See you soon. See you soon, Lily, I managed, my voice thick. I watched them drive away, standing in that parking lot long after their taillights had disappeared. In my pocket was the program from the play, another keepsake to add to my collection. But this one was different. This one wasn't evidence of absence, but proof of presence. That night, as I carefully placed the program in my memory box alongside decades of receipts and returned letters, I realized that sometimes parents don't disappear by choice. Sometimes they're simply silenced, erased, their love converted to ghost stories and whispers. But sometimes, if they're patient enough, if they keep the receipts long enough, if they never stop believing in the possibility of truth, they find their way back to the fourth row, to the seat that was always meant to be theirs. Not because the past can be undone, but because the future remains unwritten. Sometimes the truth doesn't set us free immediately. It first makes us question everything we thought we knew. Robert's story reminds us that behind every absent parent narrative, there may be a person who's been fighting invisible battles just to catch a glimpse of their child growing up. What would you have done in his position? Would you have kept trying for 20 years, collecting evidence and hoping for a day that might never come? Or would you have given up, accepting the story that was being told about you? The most painful silences aren't the ones we choose, but the ones forced upon us. Robert couldn't speak directly to his daughter, so he let the receipts, letters, and photographs speak for him. His patience, waiting for the day when truth would finally break through the walls of deception, shows us that love doesn't always roar loudly. Sometimes it whispers persistently through decades of rejection, never losing hope that one day it will be heard. As we close this chapter of Robert's journey, take a moment to consider the untold stories in your own life. Who might be sitting in a metaphorical parking lot, watching from a distance, hoping for a chance to be heard? If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that reveal the depths of human experience. Your support helps these important stories reach those who need to hear them most.